In the 4th century BC, the philosopher Plato invited his students to imagine a subterranean cave. Inside this cave, a group of prisoners have been chained since childhood. Their legs and necks are bound so they can only look straight ahead at a massive stone wall. Behind them, a massive fire blazes, and between that fire and the prisoners, puppeteers hold up structural cutouts of animals, trees, and buildings. The prisoners cannot see the puppets. They cannot see the fire. They can only see the dark shadows projected onto the stone wall in front of them. For these prisoners, those shadows are not a representation of reality. Those shadows are reality. They name them. They study them. They build entire hierarchies of prestige based on who can best predict which shadow will appear next. Now imagine one of these prisoners is suddenly unchained. He is forced to turn his head around. He looks at the blazing fire, and his eyes burn with blinding pain. He sees the wooden puppets, and he realizes that what he thought was a living, breathing world was merely a cheap illusion. It is easy for us, the modern, sophisticated elite, to look down on Plato's prisoners with pity. We laugh at their naivety. After all, we live in an era of unprecedented access to empirical data, scientific instruments, and real-time global news. We see things as they are. Or do we? What if the cave never disappeared? What if the chains simply became invisible? What if the stone wall is no longer made of rock, but of the neural pathways built inside your skull? The terrifying truth of modern cognitive science is that you do not live in the real world. You live in a highly synthesized, deeply biased virtual reality manufactured entirely by your own brain. Every frustration you feel, every argument you have with your partner, every midlife crisis, and every ounce of daily existential dread you experience is not a reaction to the world itself, but a reaction to the shadows dancing on your wall. Welcome to the Perception Trap. Today, we are going to look behind the fire. To understand why we are trapped, we must first shatter a deeply comforting myth. The myth that the human eye is a video camera. Most people believe that our senses objectively record the external world, transmit that raw data to the brain, and the brain displays it on a pristine internal screen. This is scientifically incorrect. In reality, your brain is locked inside a dark, silent vault of bone. It has never seen a ray of light, nor has it ever heard a sound. All it receives are ambiguous electrical impulses traveling up your nerve fibers. The sheer volume of this data is staggering. Your sensory organs are bombarded with an estimated 11 million bits of information every single second. But here is the biological bottleneck. Your conscious mind can only process about 40 to 50 bits of information per second. Think about the staggering mathematical implication of that. Your brain must discard 99.999% of reality just to keep you from going insane from sensory overload. To bridge this astronomical gap, your brain does not record reality. It predicts it. It uses a hyper-aggressive system of mental filters, shortcuts, and assumptions to build a predictive map of the world. And this is where the trap snaps shut, because the map you build is entirely constructed from three distinct psychological forces: your biological wiring, your cultural conditioning, and most importantly, your personal history of emotional trauma. Let's unpack the exact psychological architecture that keeps us blind. Deep within your brainstem sits a tiny cluster of neurons called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS is the ultimate gatekeeper of your consciousness. Its primary job is to decide which 40 bits of information make it through the straw. How does it decide? It prioritizes whatever you subconsciously believe is important to your survival or your identity. If you believe the world is an inherently hostile place where people are constantly trying to take advantage of you, your RAS goes on high alert. It selectively highlights every minor slight, every ambiguous glance, and every blunt email, while completely ignoring acts of casual kindness. This triggers a psychological phenomenon known as perceptual defense. Your brain actively blocks sensory data that contradicts your established world map because rewriting that map requires too much metabolic energy. In cognitive psychology, the primary building blocks of your mental map are called schemas. A schema is a cognitive framework or concept that helps you organize and interpret information. Think of it as a pre-built mental stencil. For instance, if you experienced a childhood where love was conditional on high achievement, you likely developed a defectiveness or unrelenting standards schema. You grow into an adult who believes, I am only valuable if I am succeeding. If I fail, I am unlovable. Once a schema is established, it activates the most destructive force in human relations, confirmation bias. This isn't just an intellectual mistake, it's a structural necessity of your brain's operating system. When you look at your life through this stencil, your brain actively distorts neutral events to fit the pattern. If a colleague doesn't say good morning, your schema doesn't think they must be tired. Your schema thinks they see through me. They know I'm a fraud. You have successfully taken a random piece of data, scrubbed it of its objective truth, and weaponized it to validate your internal misery. This leads to what psychologists call the Thomas theorem. If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. Because your brain distorts reality to match your expectations, you begin to act based on those distortions. If you believe your partner is emotionally distant, you stop sharing your feelings with them. Your withdrawal then causes them to become genuinely distant. You then look at their coldness and say, "See, I knew it. I was right all along." This is the loop of learned helplessness. You are the architect of the very cage you are crying to get out of. You are projecting a monster onto the wall, running away from it, and then blaming the room for being terrifying. This psychological distortion isn't confined to laboratory experiments. It plays out every single day in the quiet, agonizing moments of modern life. We do not need a dystopian sci-fi matrix to live in a virtual reality. We create our own every time we step into our offices or look at our relationships. Let's look at 3 concrete scenarios where the perception trap paralyzes us. Consider the corporate projection. Imagine an employee named Sarah. Sarah is highly capable, but she carries an underlying schema of professional inadequacy, a deep-seated fear of being exposed as an imposter. During her annual review, her manager spends 20 minutes praising her exceptional creativity, her work ethic, and her technical skill. But in the final 30 seconds, the manager offers one constructive critique. "I'd love to see you speak up more in our group strategy meetings." What does Sarah's brain do through the filter of confirmation bias? It instantly deletes the 20 minutes of praise. Her RAS categorizes the compliments as polite noise and hyperfocuses on the single critique. She drives home in a state of high anxiety, convinced that her job is on the line and that her manager dislikes her. Sarah's map of reality tells her she is failing, so she goes into defense mode. In the next meeting, instead of speaking up, she becomes even quieter to avoid making mistakes. Her manager notices her withdrawal and thinks Sarah lacks engagement. The trap has closed. Sarah's internal illusion has successfully manifested a real-world professional barrier. Now consider the intimate ghost. This occurs in our closest relationships. Imagine Mark and Elena. Mark grew up in an environment where conflict meant abandonment. His schema reads any emotional friction as an existential threat. When Elena comes home exhausted from a grueling day at work, she sits on the couch in silence, staring at her phone to decompress. Mark's predictive brain looks at Elena's silence and doesn't see a tired human being. It sees a shadow labeled imminent rejection. His anxiety spikes. To protect himself, he becomes passive-aggressive, making a cynical comment about her being glued to her phone. Elena, who was simply exhausted, now feels attacked and snaps back. Mark retreats to the bedroom, thinking, "Our relationship is falling apart." Mark is not reacting to Elena. He is reacting to a ghost from his past that he has superimposed over his wife's tired face. Whether it's the friend who took 3 hours to reply to your text message or the driver who cut you off in traffic, we spend our days reacting to our internal interpretations rather than external facts. We treat our automatic assumptions as absolute truths. We live in a highly personalized, deeply defensive simulation of reality. And as long as we remain blind to this process, we remain the helpless victims of a world we are subconsciously inventing. So how do we break the chains? How do we step out of Plato's cave? The solution is not a set of superficial motivational slogans. You cannot simply think positive or force yourself to see the good to fix this. That is the equivalent of painting over a structural crack in a dam. To escape the perception trap, we must systematically intercept and re-engineer the very cognitive mechanisms we exposed in Part 2. We must transition from an automatic life of reaction to a conscious life of creation. Here is your highly practical, step-by-step operating manual for cognitive liberation. Recall our fundamental problem from Part 2. Your brain takes incoming data and instantly forces it through an old schema, generating an automatic emotional reaction. To break this loop, you must create a cognitive wedge between the external event and your internal interpretation. There is a profound rule of human psychology. In the space between the stimulus and your response lies your ultimate freedom. Whenever you feel a sudden surge of irritation, anxiety, or defensiveness in your daily life, you must deploy the fact versus story tool. Take out a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. In the left column, write down exclusively the raw, indisputable, objective data, the kind of data that could be proven in a court of law or recorded by a video camera. For Sarah, from our earlier scenario, the left column reads, "My manager said 15 positive things and gave 1 piece of constructive feedback about speaking up." For Mark, it reads, "Eleanor sat on the couch and did not speak for 10 minutes. In the right column, write down the interpretation your brain automatically constructed. Sarah writes, "My manager thinks I am incompetent." Mark writes, "Eleanor doesn't love me anymore." By physically separating the data from the drama, you strip the schema of its power. You force your conscious mind to realize that the pain you are feeling is not coming from the left column. It is being generated entirely by the right column. Once you identify the story your brain loves to tell, you must launch a deliberate counteroffensive against your reticular activating system. Remember, your RAS actively suppresses data that contradicts your beliefs. To fix this, you must force your brain to look at the discarded 99.999% of reality. We call this the empirical audit. If you carry a schema that says, "People in my field always try to undermine each other," your brain will naturally highlight every competitive backstab. To retrain your filter, you must challenge your brain to find 3 explicit, undeniable pieces of counter-evidence every single week. Write down the names of colleagues who offered help without asking for anything in return. Record the moments someone credited your work in a meeting. You must force your brain to manually log these data points. Over time, this conscious repetition fundamentally reprograms the neural gatekeeper. Your RAS will slowly adjust its filters, allowing a more accurate, cooperative, and balanced world map to enter your conscious awareness. Finally, we must address the ultimate tragedy of the perception trap, the isolation of the social atom. When we lock ourselves within our defensive maps, we stop truly communicating. We stop listening to understand. We listen only to confirm our suspicions. To heal this, you must practice cognitive map alignment through radical transparency. Instead of withdrawing like Mark or becoming passive-aggressive like Sarah, you must learn to check your map against the maps of the people around you. This requires using a highly specific linguistic formula. When X happened, the story my brain automatically told me was Y. Is that map accurate? Imagine Mark turning to Elena and saying, "When you came home and sat in silence, the story my brain automatically told me was that you were pulling away from me because I did something wrong. Is that what's happening?" Imagine how the reality shifts when Elena looks up and replies, "Oh, absolutely not. I just had an exhausting client meeting and my brain is completely fried. I just need 10 minutes of quiet, and then I'd love to talk to you." With one simple, vulnerable sentence, the phantom projection vanishes. The shadow on the wall is exposed for what it is. Nothing but hot air and old memories. You have successfully stepped out of the cave and touched the solid ground of real human connection. The transition out of Plato's cave is not a single grand event. It is a quiet, continuous, daily choice. It is a commitment to a life of profound mental discipline. It is far easier to remain a prisoner. It is comforting to sit in the dark, pointing fingers at the shadows, complaining about the unfairness of the shapes moving across the wall. It gives us a sense of self-righteous certainty to believe that our anger, our resentment, and our helplessness are completely justified by the world around us. But that certainty is a hollow consolation prize for a wasted life. The moment you accept that you are the author of your internal map is the exact moment you reclaim your sovereign freedom. The world out there is vast, unpredictable, and infinitely complex. It is neither entirely hostile nor entirely perfect. It is a canvas. Stop fighting the shadows at your wall. Stop running away from ghosts that you brought into the room. Take a deep breath. Step back from your assumptions. Clean the lens of your perception. And finally, for the very first time in your life, look at the light.